Thank you for that very thought-provoking food for thought paper. Our second speaker is Shaman Hatley, who is Associate Professor in the Department of Religion at Concordia University in Montreal. And he is going to pick up on the subject that we have just been hearing about. His paper is titled The Yoga of the Yoginis, Mapping the Goddess's Powers in Text and Image. He is, in fact, I think, just about to publish a volume called Goddesses, Women and Ritual, The Figure of the Yogini in Early Medieval India. I've had a sneak preview of his visuals, and I think we're all in for an absolute treat. Shaman.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Thank you. I chanced upon the goddesses known as yoginis more than 15 years ago as an undergraduate student. Their unique visual forms and reputed connections to yoga and Tantra stirred an inexplicable curiosity. Before long, I had in hand a copy of Vidya Dehejia's pioneering art historical study, Yogini Colton Temples. This book documented all of the known yogini temple sites for the first time, as well as loose statuary from dozens of museums. Entranced by yoginis, I continued to study them as a graduate student in Sanskrit and religious studies. At an early stage in my PhD research, David White published Kiss of the Yogini. This wide-ranging and original work opened up entirely new questions and possibilities for me, as he continues to do this afternoon. I would hence like to thank Professor Dehejia and Professor White for their groundbreaking scholarship, without which I would have long groped in the dark, seeking to make sense of yoginis. Although one typically associates yoga with meditation, asceticism, and corporeal manipulation, recent scholarship has emphasized the extraordinary powers that have equally been constitutive of the category yoga. Speaking of extraordinary powers, I noticed that this podium rises and goes down. Is there a... Sorry.
Not at all. It does rise. Let's just see if we can do that.
Thank you. And speaking of extraordinary powers also, I want to put in the background a different slide, which I'm not going to have a chance to talk about, but by popular demand I was asked to show anyway, the yoga bunny. And this is perhaps an appropriate image to show because as you'll see, I'm going to be talking about a rather different set of dimensions to the figure of the yogini. And what better than our entirely vegetarian yoga bunny. Although one typically associates yoga with meditation, asceticism, and corporeal manipulation, recent scholarship has emphasized the extraordinary powers that have been equally constitutive of the category yoga. I would like to expand upon the idea that the figure of the yogini embodies yoga in the sense of numinous power, beginning with tantric texts and afterwards through iconography. The very name signifies command of yoga. Yogini is one who possesses or practices yoga in the feminine gender. Command of yoga is accentuated by the near synonym yogeshwari, meaning master of yoga in the feminine gender. Some of the earliest references to yoginis in tantric literature emphasize this, referring to the goddesses as perfected in yoga or possessing yogic lordship, yoga ishwarya. This indeed is the traditional explanation for the name. Yoginis possess and may bestow yoga ishwarya, the lordly or numinous power of yoga. The classical view is that this lordly power, yoga ishwarya, comprises 8 supernatural abilities to become infinitesimally small, light, or gargantuan at will, to obtain whatever one wishes for instantly, the ability to create things by mere will, possession of sovereignty, even over the gods, the ability to control all things without hindrances, and freedom to experience pleasures without the inconvenience of suffering due to karma. One arrives at a more nuanced and heterogeneous picture of the yogini's numinous power by examining representations of the deities in early medieval tantric literature, in instructions for ritual performance, in taxonomies of yoginis, in expositions of tantric metaphysics, and in narratives involving yoginis. a number of patterns emerge. First, theologically, yoginis were considered agents for the supreme deity's bestowal of grace. They thus embody collectively one of the principal functions of his cosmic power or Shakti. As his radiance of grace, they are goddesses of cosmology, presiding over planes of existence and cycles of time. They likewise preside over the powerful places, the pitas of tantric sacred geography. They pervade the human body as well, as deities of the bodily constituents and the chakras of yoga. Taxonomies of yoginis present them as a hierarchy of beings, extending from the most powerful tantric goddesses to the women who ritually embody yoginis. Second, highly distinctive to yoginis is their association with animal forms and shape-shifting, and perhaps I need say nothing more about that. From horses and lions to birds and snakes, textual representations of yoginis provide them with the heads of a variety of animals. Yoginis also possess the power of changing form, taking on the guises of female animals in particular, and transforming others at will. While etymology links yoginis with the 8 lordly powers, tantric literature provides them with a much more expansive list of occult powers. These range from the 6 acts of tantric sorcery, the Shat Karman, such as driving away or killing enemies, to the preparation of magical elixirs, entry into subterranean paradises, or joining the ranks of the celestial wizards, the Vidyadharas. Next, yoginis are goddesses of war and specialize in demon slaying, much like the mother goddesses of ancient India from whom they derive. In this, they function as female counterparts to Shiva's Ganas, bellicose, exuberant deities who, like their lord Ganesha, often sport animal faces. Another facet of the yogini's power lies in their dual role of protecting and transmitting esoteric tantric teachings. Yoginis are enforcers. They destroy those who violate tantras or break initiatory vows. They may also transmit to devotees the secret teachings of their clans. Finally, yoginis fly, and this is foremost amongst the powers sought by devotees. The archetypal yogini is the autonomous sky traveler, the Kechari, joining whose ranks represents the ultimate ritual attainment. This, in summary, is how I understand the yoga of the yoginis to be represented in Tantric Shaiva literature, beginning from the 7th century. However, such representations do not necessarily provide us a compelling picture of how yoginis were understood in the context of their temples. Their open-air temples, constructed from as early as the 9th century. A more useful textual source for understanding the yogini temple, in my view, is the Devi Purana in its 50th chapter. This delineates yoginis as 60 forms of the great goddess, the Mahadevi, worshipped in a calendrical cycle as deities of the year, Samvatsara Devataha. Happy yoginis are good citizens, protecting the royal family, the state, and the populace in peace and war. The calendrical, non-esoteric nature of yogini worship in the Devi Purana demonstrates that the prescriptive texts of tantric initiates are inadequate guides to the religious imaginaire of the yogini temple. We must also seek to learn the yoginis directly from their statuary, from the yoga bunny. But as I mentioned, I'm afraid I have to cut out the section and proceed now to Hirapur in Orissa. This is a circa 900 CE temple of 64 yoginis near to Bhuvaneshwar. The statuary is comparatively well preserved, and only 2 images are missing, one of the 4 yoginis from the central pavilion, and the central deity, who I presume to have been Bhairava for various reasons. The diminutive yoginis of the Hirapur temple are delicately crafted and expressive. Unlike some yogini sets from central India, the images are not labeled, and individual identities are difficult to establish. Several deities may be identified as matris or mother goddesses, some more securely than others. On the left, for instance, is the directional mother goddess Agni, identifiable by her fiery backdrop and the ram she stands upon. Brahmi on the right can be identified by her 3 faces, 4 actually, one's invisible, and by the Brahminical sacred thread she wears, she being the only yogini who wears one. Other rather delightful yoginis resist identification altogether. Note, for instance, the goddess on the left, who stands upon a duck, holding a winnowing basket inscribed with a lotus. On the right, a goddess with a radiant smile balances gracefully on a pair of wheels set on the back of a rat. She beats a damuru drum with hands on knees. Her iconography calls to mind a goddess named Chakravega, or wheel speed, who occurs in multiple early tantric yogini pantheons, Buddhist and Shaiva. Distinguishing the yogini temple of Hirapur is the presence of astronomical deities. As Margaret Thompson observed several decades ago, 8 of the goddesses have mounts which correspond to the emblems of signs of the zodiac, which are common to both Hellenistic and Indian astrology. The most conspicuous is the archer, emblem of Dhanus, or Sagittarius. This is present on the pedestal of the animal-faced yogini shown here. She presumably embodies the qualities and powers of the sign of the zodiac. 2 other images bear unmistakable zodiacal emblems. On the top left is the crab, symbol of Cancer, and on the upper right, the scorpion of Scorpio. Note also on row 2, the Makara sea monster emblem of Capricorn and the fish of Pisces. One also encounters the bull, lion, and ram, which, though common enough in yogini iconography, could here be linked to Taurus, Leo, and Aries. Not in evidence, and many of the statues are too damaged, unfortunately, to discern, are the emblems of the scales and the pairs of twins and pairs of virgins that would signify Libra, Gemini, and Virgo. Aquarius, known in India as Kumbha, the pot, might be signified by the pot below a yogini who also beats joyfully upon a pot-like upright drum. In addition to the zodiac, several more yoginis may incorporate emblems of the 9 planetary deities, the Navagrahas. I begin with the image which first suggested this possibility to me. Yogini number 10 stands upon a severed head. Her headstand is unremarkable in and of itself. But notice his facial hair. The head's mustache and neatly trimmed beard are characteristic of a rather famous severed head, the planetary demigod Rahu, who periodically swallows the sun and moon, causing eclipses. As he doesn't have a torso, they pass through unharmed eventually. The resemblance is slender evidence, but note also another yogini's rather curious mount. Yogini 17, a fierce-faced goddess who holds the hilt of a broken sword, stands upon what appears to be the severed tail of a giant lizard or snake being, serpent being. It's not a snake, for it grows much thicker at one end, then abruptly breaks off, as though cleaved from its body. This suggests to me the demonic planetary deity Ketu, the comet, who is always depicted as having the lower body of a serpent. In myth, Rahu on the left and Ketu on the right were a single demonic snake being before being decapitated by Vishnu. I would suggest that in these 2 Hirapur yoginis, we have unusual renderings of the bifurcated planetary demon, whose head and tail become emblems of planetary yoginis embodying their powers. With this in mind, I began to search for more planetary yoginis. Belief in planetary yoginis underpins a minor astrological system known as Yogini Dasha, still popular in India today. Although the iconography and animal mounts, the vahanas, of planetary deities vary widely in both text and iconography, these may provide clues for identifying astral goddesses among the Hirapur yoginis. As an example, note this late medieval Indo-Persian painting of the planetary gods and their mounts in the Guime Museum. Surya, the sun, rides his characteristic chariot drawn by 7 horses. Venus hops about on a frog, The headless Ketu sits astride a tortoise, and so forth. Among the Hirapur yoginis, one goddess from the central shrine dances gracefully upon a gazelle, an animal with an enduring association with the moon. The pair of broken lotus stems flanking the goddess strengthen the association, for the lunar and solar deities often hold a pair of lotuses. She may hence provide an early example of the goddess Mangala from this astrological system, the planetary yogini presiding over the moon. A martial yogini, also on the wall of the central shrine, possesses a quiver of arrows and stands upon a ram. These emblems could suggest the planetary deity Mars. Yet another yogini stands upon a rather ponderous frog. Given how unpopular frogs were as vehicles for the gods, it seems reasonable to link her to the planetary deity Shukra or Venus, who is known to mount an amphibian. If my speculation is correct, the Hirapur pantheon thus provides an early precedent for yoginis as goddesses presiding over the planets. These are the deities whom the Purushcharyarnava describes as mothers of the planets, Graha Matraha. In addition to their astrological symbolism, imagery of dance, music, warfare, and the natural world distinguish the Hirapur yoginis. Many goddesses strike graceful dance poses, such as the yogini on the left on a lotus pedestal. Several play percussion instruments, such as the goddess I've shown you already, who beats upon a drum. Equally noteworthy is the deity's martial imagery, which is balanced by the beauty and abundance of nature in their representation. An array of birds serve as mounts, such as the peacock, hen, duck, crow, and parrot. These remind us that flight was foremost among the powers of yoginis. Other yoginis have trees or flowers as their emblems, or the elements water and fire. Through such vegetal, elemental, and animal associations, the yoginis of Hirapur evoke the vibrant diversity of the natural world. They also evoke the female social world. The yoga of the yoginis of Hirapur was an affair of notable sartorial splendor. They evoke the varied ways in which 10th century women and goddesses dressed and adorned their bodies, and their rather striking hairstyles. As seen in the upper and lower left, there is a preference for large, elaborately dressed buns set off prominently to the side with decorous hairpins, flowers, and jeweled hairbands. Some yoginis style their hair upwards like a crown or twist it into a round bun on top. In the very center, one yogini has knotted her hair in small curls sticking closely to the head. The yogini next to her on the far right instead wears a regal crown. The yogini in the bottom middle has arrayed her matted locks in a halo of decorous rings. The yogini to her right has instead bound her tightly coiled locks upwards like a crown. While exuding beauty and abundance, the Hirapur yoginis also abound in images of death. Approaching the temple, one first encounters 9 guardian goddesses along the outer wall, deadly weapons in hand. They stand upon severed heads flanked by jackals, reminding us that the circle of yoginis is a place of lethal power. One emaciated goddess in the circle bears a severed human head, holds aloft the hide of a freshly killed lion, and stands above a scavenging jackal, who may be pregnant. It's very curious. Yet these very images of death also signify the possibilities of their transcendence through perfection in the mortuary rituals of the Tantric traditions. I would suggest that the statuary of Hirapur visually communicates aspects of a distinct vision of the yoginis, which in important ways departs from their representation in Tantric literature, in a sense departing from the vision of yoginis that Professor White shared with us a moment ago. Embodying the powers of the planets and the signs of the zodiac, its deities reveal a desire to influence the astral divinities regulating human experience. The presence of astrological goddesses also points towards a cyclic calendrical liturgy of the kind intimated by the Devi Purana. In this way, Tantric goddesses who served as custodians of esoteric teachings, enforcers of initiatory secrecy, and invasive spirit beings are recast as ominous but potentially beneficent cosmic forces. The iconography of the Hirapur yoginis also weaves together imagery of elemental forces, the living world of plants and animals, unseen worlds of spirits and divine beings, and the worlds of human culture and religion. They make visually manifest the tantric vision of a universe pervaded by Shakti, yoginis of myriad variety, filling the earth, skies, heavens, waters, and netherworlds, refracted in form as all things female. We find images of fertility and abundance, juxtaposed with war and devastation, the life-sustaining power of domesticated animals, juxtaposed with the danger of wild beasts, the sanctifying purity of Vedic ceremony, and the numinous power of tantric ritual, the courtly beauty of bejeweled bodies and magnificent hairstyles, contrasted with regal crowns, the presence of death. Excuse me. I lost some text. Regal crowns and well-combed manes. The presence of death, however, reminds us of the danger inherent to the figure of the yogini, but also its possible transcendence through ritual. They thus render in stone a vision of yogic power embodied in goddesses who make manifest the cosmic play of Shakti. And I see that I have actually finished well in time and can go back to the yoga bunny. Is that right? Well, just for fun, very recently, rather with much fanfare, a yogini image was brought back to India from France. This was a yogini that was published, a photograph was published by Professor Dehejia in her monograph, and it disappeared in the meantime and recently returned with much fanfare. So here we have the yogini, which the publicity materials announces Vrishanana, which should mean bull-headed. In English, they call her buffalo-headed. Here, under the careful inspection of the government officials, we see that she sits with one leg poised gracefully over a goose, which eats from a fruit in her hand. Her eyes point downward in a concentration. She holds either a spear or a club. In many ways, her iconography echoes that of Naigamesha, the ram-headed deity. Yes, indeed, she is a ram rather than a buffalo. One of her friends, one of her sisters, presents a very interesting and distinct vision of yoga. Here we have a rabbit-headed yogini in the guise of an orthodox ascetic. She holds her right hand up in benediction, holding a rosary, an akshamala. Her left hand, she holds a water pot of an ascetic. She has a yoga patta, that is a yoga cloth or strap, binding her legs. And she sits in meditation. Her cow, I believe it's a cow, rather docilely reclines below her, avoiding any disturbance to her meditative practice. And the point I wanted to make about these goddesses is that in earlier tantric sources, therianthropic yoginis, animal-faced yoginis, represent yoginis at their most magical, their most dangerous, their most otherworldly. But what I see happening in yogini sculpture from a slightly later period is a recasting, a softening of the image of therianthropism, in which we have animal imagery, in a sense, recast in a very different light, where here we see animal-faced yoginis as protective goddesses, even nurturing goddesses. We here have our most fierce yogini, the jackal woman, howling in the night, perhaps, holding a skull, sitting astride a magically animated corpse, that is a Vetala, but she's also nestling in her arm, rather sweetly, a jackal baby who also howls with her. So what I'd suggest that we have, in a sense, fierce, dangerous, otherworldly tantric goddesses readapted to more civic religious purposes in the yogini monuments. And in a sense, she carries over the Matri, the ancient Matris, therianthropic goddesses of ambiguous power and function, who could also be harnessed for nurturing, for protection, and transformation. Thank you.